maladie sida continue à faire ravage. Il a déjà tué 40,4 millions de monde dans le monde entier. Mais, avec progrès la science, maladie ça en bas code jodi a. D'après l'Organisation mondiale de la santé, en décembre 2022, il y a 39 millions de monde qui vivent avec sida. Les maladies a été fait commencer, c'était une sentence pour la mort. Jodi a, sida c'est une maladie chronique, tant que diabète et tension, parce que il y a un remède pour contrôler sida. Médicaments pour sida diminuent quantité virus et niveau activité virus à gagner dans la commune. Si test HIV ou positif, ça pas veut dire ou gen sida, mais ça veut dire ou en route pour développer maladie sida. Si vous prenez remède régulièrement, le virus devient indétectable et puis il devient intransmissible. En anglais, on dit undetectable equal untransmissible. Ça veut dire you equal you. En créole, il fait indétectable égale intransmissible. So nous-mêmes, nous disons 1 égale 1. Remède a diminué le risque que vous gagnez pour développer maladie sida. Vous pas qu'à détecter gène dans le sang. Ça veut dire ou pas qu'à passer gène dans l'autre monde. Haïtiens, mes frères, vous de l'autre, on nous bloque sida.
Senator Michael Brady, thank you for accepting our invitation to be on MCTV. Governor Maura Healey released the proposed budget for the fiscal year 2024 to 2025 3 weeks ago. Could you walk us through the initial steps that take place at the legislative level right now?
So every year the governor releases a budget, and we have hearings all across the state. I serve on the Ways and Means Committee, so we had our first hearing the other day at the Gardner Auditorium in Boston at the State House, and the governor came before us in proposing her budget, and we're going to be reviewing that. And then we listened to different department heads, different agencies within the Commonwealth to see what their needs are as we review the budget. Then what happens is the budget eventually goes to the House of Representatives. They give their input and they vote on the budget, and they may make some adjustments and changes. They may add some things to the budget, specific things for their districts with the representatives, and then they may make some cuts as well, and then it goes to the Senate, and we have to get that done by July 1st. Sometimes if things are delayed, we have extended the budget to vote to keep government working for a month, and if there's not an agreement, because once it goes through the House of Representatives and the Senate, there's always a difference. So it goes to what's called a conference committee, and there's leadership on both sides. There's a committee that reviews the budget in the conference committee, and then we all vote on it again. And fortunately, we've had good revenue in the Commonwealth the past couple of years, so we've been able to get a lot of good things in the budget, like for school funding. We've fully funded the Student Opportunity Act for the students in Massachusetts. We've increased Chapter 70 money for public education, community colleges, which is important, and even the regional schools for the trades, because there's a big need in the job market for employment for people in the trade industry, plumbers, electricians, etc. This year, though, as we all know, revenue has been down. You know, we had the federal money coming in from the APA federal money and the COVID money. That ended. So now, and because of circumstances, like real estate prices have still gone through the roof. So we get tax revenue from the sales of real estate. But other big ticket items like washing machines, dryers, household items, those sales are down. And revenue has been down in the Commonwealth the past 4 months. So it's going to be a difficult year reviewing the budget. The stock market is still volatile, but the stocks have gone up because we get revenue from tax increases with stocks as well. But we're going to have to make some difficult choices this year because the revenue is down. The good news, though, the legislature created a rainy day account. It's like you or I having our own savings account. So if revenue is down, we may be able to tap in that to keep revenue flowing back to the cities and towns that we represent.
Senator Brady, you mentioned that you serve on the Ways and Means Committee. If I am correct, Ways and Means is the most important committee in the Senate or the House. What are the advantages of being a member of that committee?
Yes, you brought up a very good point. The Ways and Means Committee is the Ways and Means where everything has to go through before it gets finalized, before it goes before the whole Senate body. And I'm very fortunate that I'm close to the chairman of Ways and Means, Mr. Michael Rodrigues. He's the chairman. He oversees the Ways and Means Committee, but a lot of legislation goes through that, funding goes through that, and it's a very important committee because any pieces of legislation, 99%, goes through the Ways and Means before it comes to before the full body for a final vote. And we have a lot of things we discuss on that. So I'm very fortunate that I serve on that committee. I'm very fortunate that the Senate President appointed me to that committee. And the good news, Mr. Rodrigues, who's the chairman, he represents the city of Fall River and some suburban communities, kind of like I represent the city of Brockton and several South Shore communities as well. So we represent similar areas. And we know the needs that our districts have. You know, the city may have different needs than the towns that I represent, the suburban areas, but it's very important. And that's why the most important thing is listening to our constituents in the elected officials in the district to see what their needs are so we can get that implemented into the budget. But it does give me a little leeway being on the Ways and Means Committee and also having the relationship I do with leadership in the state Senate.
Once the budget proposal is introduced to the legislature, what are the key stages it goes through before it can be passed into law?
So, as I mentioned, the governor proposes her budget, whoever the governor may be. We have Ways and Means hearings all over the Commonwealth. We started last week in the Gardner Auditorium, and we listened to the different departments. Like this past week, the treasurer came before us, inspector general came before us, IT with technology, which is very important, and the governor proposed her budget. So then we go into different areas of the budget to listen to the different departments across the state. And then, as I mentioned, then the House will be reviewing their own version of the budget because everything starts in the House of Representatives after it leaves the governor's office. They will be deliberating and debating the budget. They will be voting on their initiatives. And then it comes over to the Senate, and we do the same thing. We deliberate on the budget. I try to get different things from my district put in the budget. Like, for instance, I've gotten money for Haitian immigrants in the past few years. I represent a large Haitian community between Brockton and Randolph. So having the relationship I do have with the chairman of the Ways and Means, I was able to get a lot of money in it last year's budget. Also at Bridgewater State University, where a lot of students from my district attend our Mosaic Community College, we got money for young students going into the community colleges in the district of Bridgewater State. We also got something for immigration and refugees in the budget as well. And then other things like school funding, which is very important. I'm a big supporter of public education. Roads, transportation needs, that's very important for people to come and go to and forth to work or to school, or even having a safe way to get to the market to go shopping. So those are some of the initiatives. And water is a big issue. I represent the city of Brockton, which gets the predominant source of their water from Silver Lake. I always put money in there to make sure our clean drinking water is sufficient. And as well as the town of Randolph, I know they're building a new water plant that encompasses 3 communities, so it's important that all of my constituents get safe and reliable drinking water, and that's a big issue as well. And we also are doing things with the environment. You know, global warming is very serious. Some people in other parts of the country may not think it is, but we see the storms we have every day. Look what's happening in California, and, you know, knock on wood or whatever, we haven't had the storms we had there, but the temperature has increased every year, and we're trying to get away from fossil fuels and have clean, reliable resources to heat our homes with, for electricity, and even cars, to have vehicles that are safer and more efficient on the road and less pollution into the atmosphere and the air we breathe.
Senator Brady, usually, what are some common points of contention or areas of debate that emerge during the legislative review of the budget, and how are these resolved within the legislative framework?
Well, there's always differences of opinion, not just between Democrats and Republicans, but even between Democrats. Everybody has their own district that they represent, so their district may have different needs than my district. I was a big supporter of anaerobic digestion as well. Now, I don't have as many farms in my area, but along the coastline, whether it's down in Westport on the South Shore and the North Shore, or even the western part of the state, that's another initiative to get clean energy. You know, we do just still depend on gasoline and coal in the country, and home heating oil and oil as well, but we're trying to get away from that. So anaerobic digestion, where they can convert food waste into energy. That's good, clean way to get energy. And of course, on the coastline, as I mentioned, the solar or the wind power that we utilize, that's another way. There's a big debate about the immigration situation. Now, I have a large population that comes from Haiti and Cape Verde. That's the new immigrants in my district, predominantly. Some came from Southeast Asia, Vietnam, and other parts of the world, even Albania. So we're trying to expedite the residents coming in, because there's a lot of debate, more so at the federal level, of people coming over the border from Mexico. And we're trying to expedite, and the governor's trying to expedite getting them work permits, because, you know, no matter where you go, there's always a debate about that, oh, all the criminals are coming over the border. And there is a percentage, unlawful people coming over illegally, but there's some people that I've known personally, they have come over with legal visas. They've got a right to be here legally. And if they don't get their citizenship in a timely manner, their visa will expire. And these are good, hard-working families that want to do a better life for their families. They want to contribute to society. They want to get a good job and pay taxes and buy a home and have a safe living quarters and have a better education for their children. So that's a big debate and a big contentious issue. And it's more at the federal level, but it's even at the local level. Healthcare, which I know we're going to talk about, that's a big, serious issue, and there's a lot of debate. We need to keep these hospitals that are currently in service open, because the healthcare industry is a big issue in our district. And, you know, healthcare costs have gone through the roof. We passed some legislation to keep prescription costs down for certain generic products, like for high blood pressure, diabetes, things like that. But that is only a slim margin. There is some other healthcare prescriptions that people have to get. The costs have gone through the roof. So we've got to help our constituents continue to contain the cost of healthcare and prescriptions and so forth.
How long it takes for the legislature to debate between the House and the Senate before sending the proposed budget to the governor for signature?
Well, 90% of the time we do get the budget finalized before July 1st, because that's the fiscal year. It runs from July 1st from this year to the following year. We usually do the budgets a year in advance. So the budget is out now. The governor proposed it. We're in the first weeks of February. So we're deliberating that, and we're having hearings on the Ways and Means Committee all over the Commonwealth. And then, as I mentioned, then the House of Representatives will be taking that up in the following month, and then they have to get it over to the Senate in a timely manner. Every now and then, though, there is some disagreements between the House and the Senate. So, as I mentioned, if it goes to the Conference Committee and those disagreements have not been resolved, then we still have to have government working. So we have done it on occasion to pass a 1-month budget to keep government working, so we have sufficient funding for our cities and towns, our schools, to operate the Commonwealth's budget. It happens every now and then, but not often. But as I mentioned, there is always a difference between what the governor proposes, what the House of Representatives proposes, and the Senate. And 90% of the time we get those issues resolved. And even that, we might resolve 99% of those issues, and there may be some debate on some small portions of the budget, so we have to get that resolved. For instance, the gun legislation. There was some gun legislation passed in the House of Representatives. They passed it, give or take, a month ago. The Senate had their own version. And the Senate put in some amendments to that talked about protecting legal gun owners. We don't want to hurt the legal gun owners that go hunting or go to the rifle range or whatever. But there's some initiatives put in there to try to ban certain assault weapons. But again, if a person owns a legal gun now that could be considered an assault weapon, you don't want to hurt them moving forward and make them a felon. So we're grandfathering some of those rights in. But also mental health is a big issue. People that get illegal guns, ghost guns are a big issue. So those things we're debating as we speak now. And as I mentioned, there was a different version in the House as well as the Senate. So that is going to a conference committee to get those differences resolved.
If you just join us, you are on MCTV. We are broadcasting from our studio located Randolph, Massachusetts. Our guest today is Senator Michael Brady, representing the 2nd Plymouth and Norfolk in the Senate. Senator Brady, another topic we would like you to address today, the Steward healthcare system crisis in Massachusetts, in Brockton in particular. Could you provide an overview of the situation and its implications for the community's access to healthcare services?
Yeah, and I appreciate that's a very important question and concern from all of us. You know, when I grew up in Brockton, we had a hospital, the Goddard Memorial on the Stoughton-Brockton line. We had the Cardinal Cushing, then we had Brockton Hospital. And even before that, we had a lot of small hospitals. Those are gone. The big companies have taken over the smaller hospitals. And right now we had two in Brockton, the Good Samaritan, which is owned by Stewart, and then the Brockton Hospital, which is now called Signature Healthcare. And unfortunately, with the fire, the electrical issue that happened at Stewart Healthcare, that has closed that building, and they're still trying to get equipment, generators in, et cetera. I know our labor unions, our electricians are working diligently to get that hospital up and running, but it's still not going to be fully operating until maybe June or July if we're lucky. In the meantime, they have different departments open, like the urgent care is open 24/7, or for people to go for colonoscopies or procedures, that is open. But it's been a big burden on our whole South Shore because, as we know, not just people from Brockton, but the whole South Shore people will come to these hospitals. So the other hospital in Brockton, the Good Samaritan, they are in a financial serious situation, and they have been for quite some time. So we have the Inspector General, we have the Department of Healthcare keeping an eye on that hospital, not just that hospital, but any hospital Stewart owns. There was a big concern that they were going to have to close some of their hospitals, like the Sinai, which is not a regular hospital, the New England Sinai in Stoughton, that's more for elderly rehab, but the hospitals up in the North Shore, Boston, the Kearney Hospital in Dorchester, Norwood Hospital had a flood issue, that's closed. The Morton Hospital in Taunton, even before COVID, they closed down the maternity and the pediatrics. So young families looking to have babies at the Morton Hospital in Taunton were coming up Route 24 to go to the Good Samaritan. Some babies were actually born on Route 24. It was so serious. So fortunately, Stewart Healthcare came up with some funding. In the Good Samaritan Brockton, just to let you know, is ahead of the game. They're in decent financial standing, but some of these other hospitals are not. They're trying to sell them off, but they have a lot of expenses and they have to pay their bills in a timely manner, like you or I have to pay our bills. And fortunately, Stewart did come up with some money to keep things sustained for the time being, but you never know, and we're keeping a close eye. Even the South Shore Hospital in Weymouth, they're taking a burden of people in the South Shore because that's the next closest hospital, or the Beth Israel in Plymouth, or the hospitals up in Milton and so forth. So, as I mentioned, I've been in contact with our federal delegation, Congressman Lynch. They're keeping an eye on things. We're keeping an eye on things in the state level with the Department of Public Health, and hopefully things are moving forward, but it's a very serious situation, and you never know from day to day what's going to happen. I've heard horror stories that residents that we represent are going to the Good Samaritan Brockton. They're waiting anywhere from 24 to 48 hours in the emergency room. The emergency rooms are overcrowded, and mental health is a big issue because some people with mental health issues go to the emergency rooms. That's tying up. We did open up some mental health facilities in Brockton at the Braemore Nursing Home and some other facilities, but that's a big crisis in itself. And we've passed some legislation to address mental health and the addiction crisis as well, but we need to keep an eye on the Good Samaritan facility and Stewart to make sure things are staying open and moved in a timely manner. If things are worse comes to worse, the state will have to come in and maybe come up with some resources if Stewart goes under. But we're not at that stage yet, but we're coming close to that cliff. So we're very concerned about this. And every day I'm talking with our state delegation, our federal delegation on a weekly basis to make sure that things are sustained and stay open for the time being. But, you know, we have nurses. We've got to take care of our healthcare workers. The nurses kind of get burnt out there. They're, you know, almost 24 hours. You don't want them getting burnt out when they're giving out medications to people. You want to make sure they have staffing levels up. That's an important thing. And it's been a burden on the whole Commonwealth, not just the South Shore, but I represent the South Shore, so I'm in constant contact with my fellow colleagues in the State House and my local city and town officials as well.
Some residents and healthcare advocates have expressed frustration with the handling of the Stewart healthcare crisis, citing issues of transparency and accountability. How do you plan to address these concerns and ensure that residents' voices are heard in the decision-making process?
That's one of the reasons I'm in constant contact with healthcare professionals in the Commonwealth and my colleagues in the Senate, in the House of Representatives, locally in the governor's office as well, because I know the governor's been staying on top of things, and then also with our federal delegation. And they have provided some funding to help keep things open, not only for that hospital, but even to help get Signature Healthcare open. The sooner we get Signature Healthcare open, because that Brockton campus was a much larger hospital than the Good Samaritan, that will help ease the burden. But again, we're keeping a close eye on the Stewart healthcare crisis. As I mentioned, right now the Brockton campus has enough money to keep things flowing, but these other hospitals, they're in financial difficulty, in the red, and they're looking to sell those off. And that's another concern. You know, who would buy a hospital that's not financially stable, or any business for that matter? The other thing we learned, the Stewart healthcare facilities, all these hospitals, they don't own the building in the hospital that the land sits on. They may run the hospital, but there's another company that runs and owns the property. So that's a concern. There's lease agreements with the property owners, and that's another concern. If another company takes over the contract or takes over the hospital, do they have to buy by the contract, or are they going to renegotiate the contract? So as I mentioned, all of these entities, we are all working together to keep an eye on anything that's happening with Stewart. Right now, things are stable, but you don't take anything for granted. You know, you and I have to balance our own checkbook and our pocketbook to pay our bills on time and everything else, and Stewart has had a lot of deficiencies on that. And because of that, some procedures have been put on hold or canceled, and we're keeping a close eye. And I know that the Department of Public Health is going into these Stewart facilities to make sure everything is run properly.
Looking ahead, what measures or initiatives the legislature might consider preventing similar healthcare crises from occurring in Massachusetts in the future, and how can residents contribute to these efforts?
This is a big issue that came up. A lot of these hospitals were nonprofit years ago. For instance, the Cardinal Cushing was owned by the Archdiocese. The Brockton Hospital is a nonprofit hospital, it's now called Signature Healthcare. We may have to look to tweak and change some of the laws, because these companies, these hospitals, were allowed to become for-profit. And again, in the world we live in the United States of America, we're a capitalist society. There is nothing wrong with a company being for-profit as long as they do the right thing. But the problem with the financial situation that Stewart has done has definitely raised some eyebrows and concerns. So I'm talking again with my leadership in the Senate. We may have to change some laws or tweak some of the laws to make sure this doesn't happen again. This shouldn't have never come to the situation it has been. And again, you know, like you or I, we got to pay our bills on time. You know, they may have some penalties that arise because of this. In, you know, the auditor's office, the inspector general, the Department of Public Health, everybody is keeping an eye on things at Stewart. Right now, things are sustained and stable, and they came into this financial little bulk of financial windfall. But again, it doesn't last forever. And talking with the leadership in the Senate, as I mentioned, we may have to change some of the laws or tweak them. Again, everybody has a right to own a business, and we have a capitalist society, but you know, it's almost like when the stock market crashed in 1929, people took advantage. A lot of big companies swallowed up the little guys. They changed monopoly laws from those days, and they learned from that. I think we're going to have to tweak some of the laws moving forward to adjust that so this doesn't happen again.
To end this interview, Senator Brady, let's talk about education. Last Monday, you were among the elected officials at Martin Young Elementary School in Randolph when the Governor Healey, Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, the Secretary of Education Dr. Tutwiler came to celebrate their new initiative, Literacy Launch, reading success from age 3 through grade 3 with students, educators, and early literacy advocates. What do you think about this event last Monday at Martin Young Elementary School in Randolph?
Well, the good news, even though we're coming into some tight financial times these past couple of months in the Commonwealth, we have fully funded public education, the Student Opportunity Act, the Fair Share Amendment, and the governor has been very supportive of early literacy and early childhood learning. You know, when I was a city council in Brockton, long before I became a state senator and a state rep, we fully funded full-day kindergarten. Some communities could not afford to do that. As you all know, it is better to have early childhood learning because young children pick up even learning a different language much quicker than an adult does. It's so important to help those young children to start learning education at an earlier age. And as my district, you mentioned, I do represent the city of Brockton. I have the towns of Whitman, Hanson, Halifax, East Bridgewater, and now with redistricting the past 2 years, I represent the town of Avon and I represent the town of Randolph with Senator Walter Timothy. I have the south side and he has the north side. We work very well together, and as well as Representative Bruce Ayers and Representative Driscoll. So this is so important, and I'll tell you, the town of Randolph has done a yeoman's work. It was so impressive, as you mentioned, when the governor came to the school. These kids read these books about dinosaurs, and I have to confess, they understood more about dinosaurs than I did, and their pronunciation was better than myself. I was so impressed with these students. And then the bands, you know, as I mentioned, I came from Brockton, which had Vinnie McCreen as the head of the band. They used to win awards all over the country. But the town of Randolph has a wonderful high school band, and they perform for the governor as well. In some of these other towns, like Whitman Hanson has a regional school district that they combine both communities. They had tough times funding their schools, even regional transportation, because you've got to make sure that these young children are able to get to and from school. And that's a big thing we try to increase for transportation costs every year. And also they have school choice in the Commonwealth, so some students that live in one community can go to the town next door if they choose to do so. And then regional schools, Southeastern Regional is part of my district. We have Blue Hills Regional. Those children and those students are learning trades, and as I mentioned, there's a ton of need of people in the workforce in the trade industry, and they're making a good living, more than when I was younger. And then we have the Catholic schools, that's, you know, run by the Archdiocese, and charter schools. The big thing is, though, we don't want to, you know, everybody has reason and rights to choose where they want to send their children to school, but you want to make sure that the charter schools do not take funding away from the public education system, because that's been a big debate. There's certain types of charter schools that work within the public education system. In Horace Mann, public education started in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We were the first state in the whole country to have free public education for our young students, and we've got to continue to fully fund education. And it was so impressive that the governor was here in Randolph the other day, and the children and the teachers were very impressive. And I was pleasantly honored to be there, but pleasantly impressed, because, as I mentioned, these kids knew more about dinosaurs than I did, and they read the books very efficiently.
Maladie sida continue à faire ravage. Il déjà touillé 40,4 millions de monde dans le monde entier. Mais, avec progrès la science, maladie ça en bas code jodi a. D'après l'Organisation mondiale de la santé, en décembre 2022, il y a 39 millions de monde qui t'a vécu avec sida. Les maladies a été fait commencer, c'était une sentence pour la mort. Jodi a, sida c'est une maladie chronique, tant que diabète et tension, parce que il y a un remède pour contrôler sida. Médicaments pour sida diminuent quantité virus et niveau activité virus a gagné dans commun. Si test HIV ou positif, ça pas veut dire ou gen sida, mais ça veut dire ou en route pour développer maladie sida. Si vous prenez un remède régulièrement, le virus devient indétectable et puis il devient intransmissible. En anglais, on dit undetectable equal untransmissible. Ça veut dire you equal you. En créole, il fait indétectable égale intransmissible. So nous-mêmes, nous dit 1 égale 1. Remède a diminué le risque au gagné pour développer maladie sida. Yo pas qu'à détecter gène dans sang. Ça veut dire ou pas qu'à passer gène dans l'autre monde. Haïtiens, mes frères, y'une de l'autre, on nous bloque sida.